Ministry. Ministry. There's a story in the Bible that's well known, I hope, but it's all about ministry. Jesus and his disciples are at the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem, which means it's wintertime, early wintertime. And they have gathered in a large place, and the head rabbi says, we're going to do something different this year, amen? We're going to break into circles of law. I did that one on my own. Circles of law. So they broke up, and the issue that just had everybody on edge was there was a visiting rabbi who was coming, and instead of talking about a judgmental God, was talking about grace, love, forgiveness. Whoo, amen, amen. As they gathered in their circles of law, it soon became evident that this rabbi was present and he was spreading this news. And before long, the church responded, amen, as the church has to defend God. And they took up rocks and they began to chunk them at Jesus and his disciples. And Jesus and the disciples took a hasty exit from church. They did not stay for ordination. Off they went. They left and they went southwest. And they went to the Jordan River and across the Jordan River near where John had baptized Jesus, because at that time of year, smallmouth bass are running. And they went to a fish camp over there and they commenced the fishing. Amen? Amen. Safe, it's wholesome, it's good. They're fishing. Well, meanwhile, back in a little suburb of Jerusalem in Bethany were two sisters and one brother, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. Their parents had passed on some time ago, but they had been brought up strong in First Church Bethany. They were good folks. They just never found anybody to marry. And they lived together in the same house. Martha was the organizer. She'd been president of the United Methodist Women for in 2 years. Speak if you know somebody like this. She never thought of what she did as ministry, but it came from her. She was an organizer. And she quietly made sure everything in church was right any times the doors were open. Amen? Do you know Martha's? Martha also was in charge of the kitchen. And she knew where every pot, spoon, fork was. And she knew when some heretic came in and moved one of those. Do you know Martha? Yeah, amen. Mary was the middle sister. And Mary was loud. Mary spoke her mind. We would like to say that Mary spoke the truth, and that's happened sometimes, but most of the time, Mary just spoke her mind. Do you know Mary in the church? Yes, Mary served on PPR one time. One time. And word spread through the annual conference, if you're appointed, love Mary, but keep her off the PPR. She would keep score on the sermons. And at the annual meeting of the PPR, say, Pastor, you had 3 good sermons this year, which is an improvement. But Mary also had this gift of loving children. She knew every kid in Bethany's name. Amen? And they knew her. And they knew if they needed to do something fun, if they just needed a place to sit, if they just needed a cookie, Mary would take care of the children. It was a ministry that just came out naturally, and she would never say, "That's my ministry." Lazarus, as you know in your biblical scholars, was a plumber. He was a plumber, and he had a van that was painted on the back. It said, if Noah had called earlier, he wouldn't have needed an ark. Mary liked that. Martha thought it was a little racy. But Lazarus was just a great guy, and any time the church needed something plumbed or unplumbed, he would swing by after work, go in when the church was empty, and fix it. Do you know Lazarus? Amen. No matter what it was. The only thing he couldn't do well, and none of us have yet, is get this musty smell out of the basement toilet. Amen? Amen. It ain't happened yet. The preacher loved it, and the administrative board loved it because they didn't have any plumbing bills to report to their apportionment. Martha, you ever seen that before? Yes, Lazarus. Well, Lazarus was the baby boy in the family, and his sisters pampered him. But Lazarus also knew that one day when he woke up and he had just a touch of a sore throat, it would be better not to say anything to Mary or Martha, that he just wasn't feeling 100% today. He drank his coffee, he went to work. By noontime, oh boy, as much as he prayed, as much as he wished, as much as he ignored swallowing and that feeling, it had gone to his sinuses. Amen? By 3 o'clock, he was chilled. Oh, dadgummit, I've got so much work to do. And it was coming on fast. So fast that as he was driving home, he admitted to himself that he would tell his sisters that he was catching the flu, maybe. And that would start a whole healing process of chicken soup, of put this on, take that off, drink this, no, drink that, and oh boy. But he told Mary and Martha, they put him to bed and they brought him chicken soup, and he just shivered. It was so bad, by the next morning, he consented to letting them call the doctor. The doctor came and said, 3 to 5 days, you'll be done. $50, please. Healing ministry. It got worse, and Lazarus could not get comfortable. He could barely swallow. It got so bad that Mary says, wait a minute, Jesus could heal him. He's on vacation down at the fish camp. Let's just get him back. Let's just go get him and bring him back. Well, Mary and Martha didn't want to leave Lazarus, so they got a teenage boy who was on the track team. And Mary said, Fred, go to the fish camp, tell Jesus that Lazarus, the one he loves, is sick and needs to be healed. Amen? Well, that fella took off. He had $20 in his hand too. He was happy. Shoo, off he ran. He gets to the fish camp, and Jesus is fishing. And the young man comes up panting, Jesus, Jesus, Lazarus, the one you love, the one who lives with Mary and Martha, is sick, and he needs to be healed. It won't be bad. 3 to 5 days, he'll be fine. It's all for the glory of God anyway. Well, as this conversation is going on, the other disciples think, dadgummit, you go on vacation with a minister, you're going to get called home. We're having church now, ain't we? Jesus is still fishing, but the disciples just know the routine. So they start packing up their fishing tackle box and their Look like Opie, got the fishing rod over their shoulder, their tackle box, they're ready to go. And Jesus says, where are you guys going? We're going to Bethany. Nah. 3 to 5 days, he'll be fine. It's all for the glory of God. Well, they open up their tackle boxes and start fishing too. The poor teenage boy, he's got to go face Mary. He doesn't run back as fast, not because he was tired. He was just afraid of having to tell Mary. Jesus said, 3 to 5 days, he'll be fine. And he does. He goes back and he says, Miss Mary, Miss Martha, Jesus ain't coming. He says, 3 to 5 days, Lazarus will be fine, and it's all for the glory of God. You know how Mary felt. You know how Martha felt. They were mad. They were scared. They were hurt. All they do, all the potluck dinners, all the committees, and Jesus won't come when they call. The next day, Lazarus dies. Dead. Done. Over. Flown away. Mary and Martha do what you do. You call the doctor. A doctor comes out for another $50 and says, I guess I was wrong. He didn't make it 3 to 5 days. $50. Then they call the funeral director. Funeral director comes. Mary, Martha, it's such a hard time right now, and we're here to serve you in all of your needs. You been there? You know the funeral directors. Any funeral directors in the house? I didn't think so. They bring the van that doesn't look like a funeral director's van. Yeah, right. Back it up to the house, take the body out, and go prepare it for burial. Martha's mind just starts racing. We've got to have salads, we've got to have cakes, we've got to have food for everybody that's going to come visit. Mary is angry, and she almost just wants to sit down and cry and do nothing else. The other thing they have to do is because they live in the Middle East in a time when you would go and you would, instead of sending flowers, you would get professional mourners to come. And because you live near Jerusalem, the big city, you go get the high dollar ones to show how much you loved your brother. Now, these are professional mourners, sad people, not professional moaners that we have in the church. These are mourners. I just want to be clear on that. So out from Jerusalem comes this busload of professional mourners. Anytime Mary or Martha left the house, no matter where they were going, they would be followed by the mourners. Oh, help me. What was his name? Joe? No, Lazarus. Lazarus. Oh, Lazarus, we miss you. Well, that's fun the first time. After you run out and get bread and come back and realize you forgot to get milk and you got to go back outside. Oh, all the way to the little general. The funeral happens. The graveside service happens. In heaven, Lazarus has been greeted by God. He's walking the streets of paradise. He has seen his mom and his dad, aunts, uncles, grandparents. He caught a glimpse of Moses, Elijah, Elisha, old pregnant Sarah that we read about walking down the street. How long's eternity again? Naomi, Ruth, all the great ones he has met. It is paradise. and he's in heaven and in relationship with God. At the fish camp, the Son of God all of a sudden decides, that's just a bite. He just decides, fellas, let's go to Bethany. And they're like, why? Why? Why now? Well, Lazarus has fallen asleep. And the disciples who are really enjoying this vacation say, well, if he fell asleep, surely Mary and Martha are going to wake him up. And Jesus gets a little perturbed because he wasn't talking about a nighttime sleep. He was talking about death. They were a little thick. They didn't get it. Lazarus is dead, fellas, and we need to go back. The disciples are ready for ministry. Nothing like a funeral call for ministry, amen? Except they remember the last time they were in Bethany, just a few days ago, there were rocks being thrown at them. So the disciples, in their great bravery, put football helmets on, tied pillows around their arms, had their fishing rods and their tackle boxes, and were wandering up the street behind Jesus, back to Bethany. They get to the gate of Bethany, and they sit down. And somehow word gets back to the house, and Martha hears that Jesus is out by the well. Martha is a wise woman. She does not go out the front door where the professional mourners are still hanging out for another 24 hours. She goes out the back door, sneaks down the alleyway, cuts across the courtyard, and then goes out to the main gate, and she runs into Jesus, and she says, Jesus, if you had just been here, my brother would not be dead. And Jesus says, Martha, I am the resurrection, and I am life. Whoever believes in me will live. Do you believe that? And she says, yes, but if you had only just been here. And Jesus says, Martha, your brother will live again, will be raised. And she says, I know that. We sang just the other day, I'll fly away. Shall we gather at the river? Great getting up morning. I know the hymns. But if you had just been here, my brother would not be dead. And she kind of walked away, confused, frustrated maybe, kind of wanting to put on, yeah, I understood what he said. And at the same time going, what was that about? And why wasn't he here to save my brother? It irks her enough that she goes back and thinks, I'll get Jesus. She sneaks in the back door and tells Mary, Jesus is out by the well. Mary flies off the handle, mistakenly goes out the front door. Oh, help me here. Oh, she's livid. And you can imagine, amen? She gets to Jesus and she says, Jesus, if you had just come and touched my brother, he would be alive. And she was so distraught, and the mourners were so good. Oh, that Jesus is moved. And he says, Mary, where did you bury him? The odd fellow is the only one in town. Where do you think we buried him? Take me there. So Mary and Jesus and 243 mourners, oh, go to the Oddfellow Cemetery. And they stand, and there is the tomb where Jesus, or where Lazarus is laid. In heaven, on Thursdays, God hosts the heavenly banquet. Now, this is not just a banquet. This is one table where all the heavenly saints gather. There's always room. There's no Aunt Mary sitting next to you crowding you. Everybody's got elbow room. And remember, Lazarus has only eaten for special holidays goat meat boiled in goat milk. Platters of fried chicken. And you know it's heaven because you can also choose to have with your fried chicken, chicken and dumplings. Roast beef. Pork, which Lazarus was happy to say, I've never had this. Barbecued ribs. And God, Bill, where are you? God reached down to Terra Alta, West Virginia, and got the greatest potatoes ever grown and mashed them, scalloped them, and fried them. And tomatoes in heaven are summer ripe all year round. Woo! Platters of biscuits that don't touch the platter, they're so light they float. And yeast rolls. And no margarine, butter. And you don't eat until you're hurt and full. You eat until your jaw is tired of chewing. And Lazarus began to feast with God at his right and the whole heavenly host to his left. And they're watching him and giggling and laughing because they know the joy of your first time at the heavenly banquet. It's glorious. And when everybody had finished finally eating, God gets up and goes into the kitchen. And Lazarus realizes that everybody's looking at him and smiling. God comes out of the kitchen, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but God likes to bake. And God makes in heaven chocolate meringue pie that can only be made in heaven. A thick layer of chocolate and meringue about that tall that never sweats. It's a miracle. Lazarus is looking at it not knowing what it is. He's never had dessert before. I mean, you have more goat meat for the rest of your meal. And God is smiling, and God slices and slices and pulls out a big chunk and puts it on a plate and puts it in front of Lazarus, and he's just kind of looking at it. And God says, "Go ahead, good and faithful servant." Good and faithful servant. He picks it up and he's just about to take a bite. And he hears off in a distance, "Lazarus, come out." And he looks around and nobody seems to have been calling anything. The rest of the heavenly hosts don't seem upset, but he looks over at God, and God is going, as only God can do, amen? But Lazarus still doesn't understand, and he's about to take one simple bite, and it's louder this time. "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus puts the pie down and looks at God, and things begin to click in his new heavenly mind. And he says, "Do I have to?" And God says, "It would be for my glory." I'd appreciate it. My son would be real thrilled if you did this. And ministry happened. he pushed away from the heavenly banquet. And the next thing he knew, he was back in his old, sick, sore, tired, stove-up body, wrapped like a mummy, in cloths that had been around the dead body for over 4 days. Amen? About to eat God's chocolate meringue pie, wrapped like a mummy in stinking, smelling funeral cloths. He realizes that he is where he is. He hears a familiar voice again, "Lazarus, get out here now!" He can sense light coming this way from his head, but also the sound of cicada. I got it in there. He could hear the cicada out there, and he threw his legs over the side of the bench they had placed him on, and he began to hop out of the tomb. And he's standing there, and he can hear shouts of glory, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." You could hear other people who weren't great believers going, "It's a mummy." He could begin to feel the warmth on through the claws, and then he hears that familiar voice say, "Unbind him." And 2 boys from the youth group came up. And one took a piece of cloth on this side, and one took a piece of cloth on this side, and they took off a running. And Lazarus had trouble lowering his arms. For 4 days he'd been bound up. And he began to stretch. Oh! And he opened his eyes, and there was the Son of God, Jesus the Christ, and Mary, and Martha, and the mayor of the town, and the fire chief, and the chief of police, the pastor, his first grade teacher, his Sunday school teacher, hundreds of mourners. He stretched, and he was listening to the crowd shout Jesus' name, and then he remembered, they don't put any clothes on anybody. In front of God and the world, buck naked. And he puts his arms down slowly, takes the posture of a usher, and he notices the crowd has picked Jesus up on their shoulders, and they're shouting loud hosannas, and they are heading towards First Church for a celebration. And Lazarus thinks, I was just about to have a bite of God's chocolate meringue pie, and here I stand for the glory of God. His next thought was, how do I get home without getting arrested? There are times when God calls us, and it's natural. Well, of course I'll go visit Aunt Mary. Who wouldn't want to go visit Aunt Mary? Of course I'll correct JF. Who wouldn't want to correct JF? But brothers and sisters, there are times when God calls us, and it stinks. It goes against what we thought we liked. It goes against the way we thought we did it before. It goes against what we thought we were gifted for. We just hadn't discovered what God was able to gift us with. In this book, we are told that we worship a God who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Amen? Nowhere in here have I seen where it says ministry is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Sometimes we get in our tombs and it's comfortable. We get used to the smell, the being bound up, the comfort of knowing we can't do anything more. Brothers and sisters of the West Virginia United Methodist, I tell you, God is calling. Come out, Methodist. Come out, United Methodist. Come out and trust me. The next time you're in church and you got that warm, fuzzy feeling and they start playing, "Here I am, Lord," I want you to break out in a cold sweat. I want you to think twice about that. There's JF. Wouldn't you rather have him? It's scary to step out before Jesus Christ and the world and do it a way we've never done it before. Amen? But is it possible to fail? No. Will we get the praise and glory? Maybe. Maybe not. Will God? Yes. Do we exist for the fame and glory? No. We exist for the glory of God. Brothers and sisters, come out. Come out. And when he says unbind them, just keep telling yourself it's for the glory of God. Amen.